Hello and welcome to FPL Mate, your best bet for fantasy Premier League content for the 2023-24 season. My name is Dan and it's time to start the content for the penultimate game week of the season, Game Week 37, and we're going to be bringing you what I believe to be the perfect bench boost team within a reasonable budget. So whether you're using your transfers or you just want to build that bench boost, guys, this is going to be the video for you. Leave a like, do subscribe, let's get started. So, as I said, this is going to be within a reasonable budget. So, I've built a team that costs 102.4 million. Although we will be making some suggestions of some other players you could go for if you have a little bit more budget or maybe a little bit less. It's going to be down to you guys. And we're going to go through the most obvious players first because I think that's where it's the best place to start. And then we'll start filling in the gaps of some of those other players and then going on to the bench at the end of the video. So, we'll start off with Erling Haaland. Very, very obvious player to have in your team following the 4 goals in Game Week 36. I think it's probably safe to say at this point that Haaland is back on form and he's probably going to be your captain for this game week as well. Fulham and Spurs away are 2 great opportunities for attacking returns, particularly that Spurs game, a team who are leaking quite a few goals at the moment, so could be a decent opportunity there. But we don't need to speak too much on Haaland because we all know we're going to have him in our teams for Game Week 37. Absolutely essential, whether you're free hitting, bench boosting, whatever you're doing, using your transfers, have him in your team. It's got to be done. And you've got to pair him up probably with a Phil Foden as well. If you're going for a second Man City attacker, particularly targeting that Spurs fixture, Foden is going to be the guy for you, surely. 8.4 million, still a pretty decent price for what he is returning, and I think he should be reasonably nailed on, and maybe 100% nailed on for the remainder of the season as Man City kind of try and push all the way to the winning the Premier League up against Arsenal at the moment. Maybe Liverpool just about in that race as well, but, you know, Man City are probably the bit strong favourites, and the way they're going to do that is to keep playing their best players, which does include Foden, who has been brilliant this season in both real life football and in FPL as well. We're going to go on to a third player here, and that's going to be Cole Palmer. I think he is another really obvious pick for your wildcard teams, for your free hit teams, whatever you're doing this week. 6.2 million, super bargain, penalty taker. We probably do want to load up on as many penalty takers in a double game week as possible, because as you guys know, when you get a couple of penalties, be it through Palmer, be it through Haaland in Game Week 36, the points just go up and up and up, and it really does fall in your favour. Forest and Brighton, 2 really nice opportunities. Brighton, a team that do blow hot and cold. Recently, we've seen them ship a lot of goals, but then they also did quite well against Aston Villa, keeping the scoreline low there. But if Brighton do not turn up to that game, Chelsea, with the form that they are showing at the moment, you imagine will blow Brighton away. And as for that Forest game, that's a decent fixture as well. They'll be fighting tooth and nail for a result, but Chelsea, with their great form that they are kind of building now, everything is starting to click from them, and Palmer is a huge part of that. Our 4th, 5th, and 6th player are going to be a triple Newcastle kind of thing going on here. Isak, Gordon, and Burn, I'm going to throw into this team. Again, I think these are really obvious players to have in your team. Everyone knows Isak has been in great form recently, and it's been good to see that not only is he capable of playing alongside Wilson in that Newcastle attack in a 2-man strike force, but also that he is going to maintain those penalties as he looks to chase the golden boots. It might be a little bit difficult with the form of Haaland, but with 2 fixtures against Brighton at home, again, a team that has been a little bit questionable at times recently, and Manchester United, who are conceding pretty much more chances than any other team in the Premier League. You would only put a few teams kind of at that level of Manchester United's defence at the moment. They really have been that poor. So, huge opportunity there. Gordon, with a home game, we like. He has 1 home game in these 2, which is against Brighton, which is nice. Unfortunate not to get the penalty assist in Game Week 36, but still came away from that game with the 6-pointer, which is pretty nice for him. And I think going into this game week, it's going to be another great opportunity for a top player who is seemingly, again, nailed on for Newcastle to do the business once again. Good value for money there as well. Dan Burn is the Newcastle defender of choice. He is nailed on, he is the captain, and he is also the main aerial threat from those set pieces. And I think there is going to be opportunity against Manchester United, for example. They do concede a few chances from those set pieces, so I wonder if Burn can potentially do some damage. Trippier is another Newcastle player you could possibly consider, although I think that is a little bit too risky for me. I'm not sure he's going to be available to play both games in the double game week. Wilson, maybe you might consider, but I don't think I'd go there with Isak being the main man. I think Isak plays both games. I think Wilson, more than likely, starts one of these 2 games and gets benched for the other one. Let's move on to Heung-min Son, who is probably a little bit more controversial than he might have been previously. I think if we asked ourselves who will be in our Game Week 37 teams a few months ago, Son would definitely be in there. His form has dropped off, but again, going for those penalty takers is always very useful. And 2 home games, one against Burnley, which is a nice fixture, as we know, and the other game against Manchester City, a game that Son has historically really thrived in. I think this is actually going to be an opportunity to regain some of that form. Now, I don't think it's guaranteed that he goes in and scores some points. It's not guaranteed with the form that he's been showing recently, but it's definitely an opportunity. And I think if you're, not too worried about budget, you're happy to spend the money, and you just want to get those double game week players, Son seems to be a reasonably obvious choice. I don't think he's an 100% have to own kind of player, but definitely a player to consider for your double game week 37 teams, which brings us on to another Spurs player who is going to be Pedro Porro. And I think for me, he probably is the only other Spurs player I would be reasonably confident that I think would be a really good pick for a team for the Game Week 37. And one of the reasons is set pieces. Now, we've seen now that Maddison not getting as much game time, Maddison being benched, and therefore Pedro Porro is going to be the guy on corners and free kicks, which is a very, very useful avenue to getting FPL points, particularly against a Burnley team. That is a team that does concede chances from those set pieces. Man City, not so much. Don't expect anything from Pedro Porro against Man City, but hey, you never know what can happen in football. So Burnley is really the target fixture here. Clean sheet of potential, yes, even for Spurs. And in Man City game, you maybe try and consolidate with, maybe just 1 extra point, maybe a couple extra points, but you never know what can happen in football. And with double game weeks, you are maximizing your chances of getting a little bit luckier. And that's why we're going for Pedro Porro. I think the next player that seems, a player that I would probably almost certainly go for in a Game Week 37 team is Petrovic. And that again comes back to Chelsea's good form recently. And Petrovic now keeping back-to-back clean sheets in the Premier League. He seems nailed on at this point. He is making a decent amount of saves as well. Over the last couple of weeks, getting those save points, bonus points as well on occasion. And Forest and Brighton are 2 teams really struggling for goals at the moment. I mean, Brighton barely scoring any goals at all. They are comfortably the worst attack in the Premier League at the moment. And they only scored against Aston Villa because they got a penalty, and even the penalties was missed. The rebound was scored by João Pedro. So you do have to go into this game thinking Petrovic is going to be a great shout for a goalkeeper. Save points against 2 teams with really, really weak attacks. And there's going to be clean sheets there as well. People may consider Gusto. I'm not personally convinced that Gusto will be fit enough to play both games in the double game week for Chelsea, but there's definitely a small chance of him playing both games. But Petrovic is just a much safer avenue into the Chelsea defence, particularly as there is so much rotation among Chelsea defenders typically. So Petrovic is the player I would back, the safe player to go for this game week. And I think we're going to have to use our 3rd Chelsea slot on another player who we're going to speak about shortly. But I want to go to the midfield slot next because we've got one more midfield slot to fill up. And for this video, I'm going to go for Bruno Fernandes. Now, I'm not 100% sure if he's even going to start on Monday. I'm recording this video on Sunday, so we're not sure if he is going to be available for Monday, but comments from Ten Hag, the manager, did suggest that he was at least in contention to play on Monday. And if that's the case, well, a week after, for the Game Week 37, he should be ready to go. And we know Fernandes, he's an absolute freak, he's an absolute machine, and he will play all of the games he is even slightly fit for. You're adding an extra penalty taker into your team, which is going to be very useful. It's 2 home games. That Newcastle fixture is probably more the one we are targeting, but you never know in a big clash against Arsenal whether this big team, Manchester United, might turn up. I'm expecting United to concede goals, but going for 1 attacker I think could be quite useful. But there is some other alternatives here. I think if you have the money, going for De Bruyne and tripling up on the Man City attack could be a nice differential route to take into the last couple of game weeks. And I think De Bruyne could do really, really well against the likes of Fulham and Spurs. I think he's going to be a key player in that Fulham game. And against Spurs, we know KDB is a big game player. So De Bruyne definitely an option here for that final midfield slot. And if you don't have too much money, maybe your budget is a little bit less, or maybe you want to spend more in some of the defensive positions, then you could also opt for the likes of Garnacho in that slot as well. Particularly if Fernandes is unavailable, moving to a De Bruyne, moving to a Garnacho, I think would be a pretty sensible move in that midfield. But in general, I think Fernandes is probably one of the safer picks, and it allows us to spend our final defensive slot in the starting 11 at least on another Man City player. And of course, that's got to be Guardiola. If you're not going for De Bruyne, go for Guardiola. If you're picking one Man City defender, make it Guardiola, even including Edison. I think there is no other Man City player in the defensive positions that I would be even remotely confident about picking for my team. Now, is Guardiola 100% nailed? No, he is not, but he has been playing pretty much all of the games for Manchester City recently, and he is playing in a super attacking, almost left midfield position, getting into the box, taking shots, getting assists as well, you know, creating chances for his teammates at least, and as such, we are seeing Guardiola really leading the line among all defenders for prospective attacking returns. Yes, it's not something that we probably expected to say this season, that Guardiola would be one of the best defenders for attacking returns, but that is what he is right now. And fair enough, he has been overperforming a little bit recently, getting more returns than is perhaps expected of him. But the good form, the fact that, you know, Man City want to put their best players out to win the Premier League, which does include Guardiola, and Guardiola's incredible high positioning, despite, really, we thought he was a centre-back, but now he's a left midfielder, essentially. It's going to be really, really useful, and clean sheets are always a possibility with Man City as well. They're no Arsenal, don't get me wrong, but with 2 opportunities, 2 games, particularly that Fulham fixture, I think it's going to be a huge one for clean sheets. You add an attacking return, we're suddenly talking about bonus points for Guardiola as well, and he's going to be a great pick for this game week. So it would be for me between, well, first of all, Haaland and Foden would be a lock in any team for game week 37, and then you need to make the difficult decision between a player like De Bruyne and a player like Guardiola. Anyone outside of that, I probably would not consider due to rotation risk, or in the defensive positions, lack of attacking threat there that Guardiola has and so many of the other defenders just do not have. I would say that De Bruyne is actually probably more nailed on than Guardiola if you're just looking for minutes, but I think Guardiola definitely presents a different kind of opportunity and fills up one of those defensive slots that are actually probably the hardest positions to fill at the moment. And particularly when we're talking about going for a bench boost this week, we need to make sure we do have a couple of defenders that we maybe feel some degree of confidence in at least. So let's go onto the bench and look at this bench boost, the bench boost itself. So Onana is going to be the first player on the bench. Not expecting clean sheets, but I'm expecting save points. And I do think it's so difficult to actually identify a team that is super likely to keep a clean sheet this week. Really, really difficult. I mean, some people may say, okay, can we go for Vicario after the Liverpool game for Spurs? I don't know if people will feel too confident in that Spurs defense, particularly doubling up on it. But, you know, it's definitely an option. There are some other goalkeepers. Verbruggen, if you think that he will play both games, but that is always a huge risk. Going for a Newcastle goalkeeper seems risky with Pope now back on the bench for Newcastle. You don't know who between Pope and Dubravka is going to play each game. Maybe they even get one game each, so that's not going to work. So I think Onana is pretty much the best of a bad bunch, and that's one of the reasons the bench boost might not be everything that you dream of this week, because at the end of the day, we're bench boosting a bunch of defenders / goalkeepers. That's essentially what we're doing, and there's not really too much out there right now. So let's move on to one player on the bench boost who I think can provide a bit of confidence, and that is Nicholas Jackson. So he's really coming into some good form at the moment. Really, really nice, scoring goals, getting assists, some goals, maybe tap-ins. That's absolutely fine. They all count the same in FPL. And what Jackson has been really good at this season is not necessarily finishing all of his chances. We know he's not a super clinical striker, but getting into those correct positions to score those goals, to get the opportunities to score those goals. And I expect that to continue against the likes of Forest and Brighton. If Chelsea can keep up this form, if Jackson can keep up this form, then he's going to be a really nice player to bench boost and get a decent score, hopefully, from 2 favourable fixtures for Chelsea. Now, the final defensive positions I think are a little bit more difficult, particularly if you are on a strict budget. So we're going to throw Webster's name into the hat first of all. Newcastle and Chelsea are the fixtures, and like I say, Brighton have been a little bit questionable recently. A defensive, Brighton have been, you know, they have been conceding goals. However, I watched the Aston Villa game and they really frustrated Aston Villa, and Webster put in a really good performance, got the clean sheet. You know, Aston Villa didn't even really look like scoring in that game, and Webster also managed to get bonus points in that game for his good performance. And with Van Hecke being injured, presumably for the rest of the season now, that is going to mean that Webster is going to be the starting centre-back for Brighton in his place. 4.3 million, so really nice, cheap price tag for him, and an opportunity to go for something a little bit different. Of course, if you have the money, Lewis Dunk may be an option for you. You might fancy Lewis Dunk a little bit more for his attacking threat, but it has to be said, Webster is the kind of guy who typically scores a few goals per season, so he is definitely still a defender who is capable of getting attacking returns, particularly from those set pieces, being up there for corners and the like. So can that happen against Newcastle and Chelsea? Can they keep a clean sheet against Newcastle and Chelsea? Well, I don't know. It's difficult to say. It's unlikely, really, that we can pick any defender right now that can keep a clean sheet, but Webster is definitely got to be on the cards as a potential cheap budget kind of player to go for, which leaves our final slot in defense, on our bench. Now, it is going to be difficult. Now, for this team, I've gone for Emerson Royale as the budget pick. Now, Maguire is the other budget pick, but we've got the news now that he is now injured. He is going to be out for a few weeks, so he's not going to be a good option for the double game week anymore, or for a bench boost. Emerson Royale is going to be a controversial pick. I'm definitely aware of that one. But if you are going cheap, where else do you go? I would love to get some of your opinions. Now, of course, if you have more budget, then you can maybe afford to go for maybe an Arsenal defender on a single game week. That could work. Jared Branthwaite is a little bit more expensive than Emerson Royale, who is definitely an option as well. And I think a lot of you guys may prefer to go for a player like Branthwaite, like an Arsenal defender, you know, whether it's Gabriel or Saliba or Ben White potentially there as well, if you can afford to do that. But it is going to be a budget thing. And I didn't want to make this team too expensive, so I thought, okay, let's look at the best super budget defenders, because I know with a lot of you guys owning the likes of Van Heck and Maguire, who are currently injured, you're going to be scouting around for those super cheap defenders, and really for me, Webster and Royale are the two guys I'd be looking at that cheap price tag. But I know there's been a lot of, you know, negativity, let's say, about the Spurs, particularly defensively, but Burnley at home is an okay fixture. It really is a decent fixture defensively. There is going to be opportunities. We know with Ange Postecoglou's Spurs, the fullbacks are really, really attacking. Emerson Royale is going to be playing at left back for these two games, with Udogie and Davies out for the season, so Royale is the only player there who can actually fill that position, and he's going to be getting in some dangerous positions, as we've already seen for him so far in his few appearances that he has had for Spurs. He's been getting in some good positions. So is a clean sheet guaranteed from Spurs? No, it is not. Is a clean sheet guaranteed for any team this game week? It is super difficult to pick out those defenders. So whilst I know a lot of people will have some negativity around Royale, well, you know, find better for a similar price. It is much more difficult than you think, particularly when looking for double game week players. So what I would be focusing more on is looking to get lucky with the attacking returns and at least targeting some fixtures. And out of all of the double game week defenders, the Burnley at home fixture is one of the better ones. You would say probably the Burnley at home and Brighton at home for Newcastle within the double game weeks are probably the top fixtures to really target with those defenders. So I'm okay with going for a Royale, but obviously if you have more budget, you're probably going to look to upgrade that position. That'll probably be the first player you would look to upgrade in this wildcard draft template. You know, remember guys, this is just a rough team. It is a rough guide. If you can change this team and you can find better players and you can afford better players, then you absolutely should do so. But I wanted to try and make a team, like I say, with a reasonable budget. So there we go. That completes the bench boost team. Let me know what you think about it. But before we wrap up this video, I want to talk about captaincy. And I think Captain Obvious, Mr. Erling Haaland. Yes, he is going to be our captain for this ideal bench boost team. And we're going to put the vice captain on Cole Palmer as well. Another super reliable FPL asset this season. And that is pretty much it. Let me know what you would change personally, and can you identify any other cheap defenders that you think are worth going for ahead of the likes of Emerson Royale? I'm very much open to suggestions on this one, because it's that one pick that I'm not super confident in, really, but I think he's got to be at least considered. Quite like Webster as the differential, and of course, the Fernandes versus De Bruyne debate will obviously rage on throughout this week, and yeah, it'd be interesting to hear your thoughts on particularly the defenders for this game week, because I think it's going to be a big topic of conversation this week, particularly with so many of us looking to replace our injured defenders with new guys, I suppose. So there you go, guys. Thank you so much for watching today. If you did enjoy, make sure you do drop a like. Do subscribe if you're new around here as well. Plenty of content coming up for this week, for the second to last game week of this season. I can't believe we're saying that. Very, very exciting stuff as we look to finally wrap up this season with hopefully a couple more green arrows. But I will see you on the next one tomorrow. We'll be doing a tier list, and I'll see you later, mates. Bye-bye.